I'm Kausar Riaz Ahmed. I think we should get started with this session. I'm going to quickly introduce myself. I'm the Director of Generative AI within Pfizer Medical Affairs. And today we are going to talk about how generative AI has been such a great tool within pharma and driving insights generation. We would, in particular, focus on medical affairs and commercial aspects of the pharma business in this talk. First things first, thank you, I appreciate that. First things first, the disclaimer. All views and opinions in this presentation are mine and mine only. They do not represent either my current or previous employers. Also, any mention of products, businesses, companies, or organizations, it's purely for illustrative purposes. It has no bearing on my current employer, Pfizer. So in a recent survey that was published, McKinsey reported they surveyed over 70 healthcare organizations, and they reported that at least 64% of them have started seeing a positive return on their investments. Now, I know in the last couple of weeks, Google has reported about 88%, and that goes across multiple sectors. So this number keeps increasing, and Gen AI is becoming more and more a fabric of how pharma and other industries are operating. I wanted to give you a quick glance of how Gen AI is being used all across the pharma value chain. It is estimated that Gen AI would be able to drive an economic value of anywhere from 60 to 100 billion year after year. As you can see, my apologies. As you can see here, all right. As you can see here, Gen AI has been driving target and lead identification, biomarker discovery, developing proteins and peptidologics, et cetera, going all the way from drug development to clinical development, so designing clinical trials, stratification of patients, engagements with healthcare providers and patients, manufacturing and supply chain, commercialization of your products, and all the way through the enterprise across people experience, HR, IT, et cetera. In particular, as I said earlier, the use cases that we would use for today's discussion would focus on commercial and medical affairs. And this is an illustration of Gen AI acting as your strategic imperative within medical affairs. So I'm going to go all the way from right to the left here. So let's start over here. So these are some of our no-regret wins, quick wins. These are use cases that have already been implemented where we are starting to see some very significant numbers in terms of ROI. As you can imagine, a lot of these use cases up here on the bottom right, they are more focused on content development. They are either development of content for social media, development of content for engagement with healthcare providers, scientific publications, other types of content like scientific response documents, standard medical information responses, using AI to do systematic literature reviews, et cetera. And in all of these, we have been observing substantial savings in time and cost. I think where we are right now in this moment in time is around here, in this bucket, which is emerging efficiencies. I think these are use cases. So we started off with use cases that are easy to automate, that are low risk, low levels of complexity, and mostly internal facing, do not use any type of patient data. We are now moving towards emerging efficiencies, which are increasing levels of risk and complexity. These are use cases where we are trying to integrate AI within our workflows, and these are still use cases where we are not using patient data. These include summarizing your competitive intelligence reports, omni-channel adaptation, so going from one market to the other, or being able to adapt your content from one type of communication, from email to social media, et cetera. And then generating insights from field notes, from med-info queries, other types of social listening, sentiment analysis, semantic analysis type of activities. And then again, using AI to automate your medical, legal, regulatory review pre-checks, and developing personalized, customized learning journeys for your MSLs. I think where we really want to go is in this bucket here, up on the left. High risk, high reward, transformative projects. I think in most companies within the pharma space, we have started here. Many of our use cases are still in the proof of concept stages. I think there are very few pilots that have been implemented in the transformative space. So these are where we are using predictive analytics to be able to engage better with our healthcare providers, be able to understand what the prescribing behaviors are, being able to improve our education and engagement with patients, understand their level, how AI can drive, say, better adherence, better reimbursements, et cetera. Other examples of these would be dynamic medical strategy refinement, automated regulatory submission, et cetera. I think just to reiterate and sort of summarize everything that's in the slide here, this table below, so we started off at a point where our use cases are predominantly siloed. We started off with proof of concepts that had limited impact. We are now at a point where we are deploying AI at an increased pace. We are also deploying AI at a more wider level. Enterprise adoption remains a challenge, but we are working towards scaling our AI options. I think where we want to go is towards a point where we can drive transformative value with AI, have and sustained impact across the enterprise, and develop solutions that can remain integrated within your workflows and can be transformed from one project or one product to the other. And I think the hypothesis that I want to make here is that one of the biggest drivers, the strategic mode for any company that successfully implements AI or Gen AI versus other is going to be data. Being able to develop data pipelines that come from a variety of sources. I have listed some of them up here. Your data could be either clinical, preclinical data, your regulatory, legal, patent data, financial data, regulatory data, real-world evidence, et cetera. Being able to develop data pipelines that are structured, semi-structured, unstructured, so that they are able to meet our various needs is going to be very critical in building either very sustained, pre-built data infrastructures or building just-in-time data infrastructures to support a particular business need and develop multi-agentic AI models that are mostly context-driven and allow us to apply them across a variety of use cases here. I think we are at a point where very broad knowledge graphs are becoming more and more obsolete. We are driving towards developing context-based, very specific models that meet our business need. Along those lines, I wanted to take a moment and talk about the different data products that we should be building, because really, multidimensional, democratized data products are the ones that would drive operational efficiencies and allow for scale-up of AI products and projects in a very strategic manner. So if you were to take, with that in mind, there are three data classes or three types of data products that I want to focus on. First would be your core data product that I have at the very bottom here. So these would be your foundational units of data. A lot of times, these data products have undergone, perhaps, they come from a single domain, single source, for example, from clinical data, and they probably have undergone one or two transformations. Good examples of this would be data pipelines that allow the development of tables, listings, and figures for your regulatory submissions. And then you have derived data products that come from multiple sources, from multiple business functions, and they have been processed, analyzed, transformed to meet your business need. If you imagine you are trying to ascertain what is going to be the scope or the timeline of your project, it would be these type of data that come from multiple sources that you would take into account in order to, as you go about building your projects. The third type of data is more advanced, these are analytical data products. So you would take your derived data products, and then these would be evaluated further by the subject matter experts in the field to build your knowledge bases. I up here on right, I have an illustration of how I imagine this would work. So you would start off with your raw data that comes from various sources. You would acquire it, and you would build your data products that can be used across a variety of use cases. I think this is where we need to go in order to realize efficiencies across our projects and integrate Gen AI more effectively across our workflows through the enterprise. So now in the next few slides, I would focus on a couple of high-impact use cases that we have seen. As I said before, medical writing, even regulatory writing, is always going to be that quick win, that low-hanging fruit that is poised to generate perhaps the highest value for us. There's been demonstrated use cases where an estimated 20 to 30% reduction in writer effort is expected with Gen AI. I think 2025 is the year where we have built agents. Our agents, we have multiple agents, but we are not working on very complex agents. For example, in this particular use case here, you have 3 illustrator agents: the researcher, which is able to collect your data, your raw data, build your data product, et cetera. And then you have your document authoring agent, which helps you with your authoring. And then finally, you have your quality check agent. On the left here, I have an illustration of how something like this would work in building your CSRs, your clinical study reports. You would use agents all through the process, starting off with information gathering, building your data sets, summarizing your initial clinical studies, writing up the clinical study reports, and then do a quality check. I think a much more illustrative example is this one. So this was from a recent publication from Takeda. Again, this example is purely from an illustrative perspective. I'm not affiliated to Takeda by any means. However, I think this is a really good study where they have shown how humans and AI can work together to demonstrate value. The bottom line here, I know a lot of this script on the slide is perhaps too minute for you to read from a distance, but the bottom line here is across over 100 IND document developments, what they demonstrated was that they were able to reduce the amount of time from over 100 hours to less than 4 hours to develop an IND document. So that was a 97% savings in time for the human writers working on these IND documents. I think it is also important to consider, although they saw these humongous time savings, what they also saw was the quality was somewhere between 69% to 78%. They found that the AI generated reports that they received, they were not concise enough, they were not clear enough. That was where the human needed to go in and fix it. But I think even at 69 to 78% quality, I think it's a substantial increase from where you would start with humans doing the whole process manually. So I think this is a win for humans and AI working collaboratively. Next up, I have a few high-impact use cases here. Now, word of caution, not all of these are being considered. Proof of concepts are active. Some of these are in the pilot phase, some are more actively executed. However, I do not have documented evidence on ROI or any of those metrics that we would usually toot about in a setting like this. So I wanted to start off with being able to use, I think one area where AI can be really effective is generating insights. So for example, being able to analyze your real-world evidence and clinical data to, number one, identify your care gaps, so unmet needs for the patients, being able to identify HCP prescribing behaviors, identifying better engagement opportunities with them. I think our goal is to develop insights that allow us to reach out to the right practitioner at the right time with the right type of content, therefore allowing us to, number one, launch our products in a more optimized fashion, get to the market faster, and more importantly, ultimately have that desired patient impact. And a number of use cases help us with that using Gen AI. I'm not going to read through this whole slide. This is obviously a busy slide, but a few things to highlight here. I've been, I think, in the last 2-3 months, every conference that I've gone to with a healthcare focus on AI, I have seen companies come up and talk about how they are developing pre-call, using AI and Gen AI to develop pre-call notes that would allow MSLs to engage better with the healthcare providers. I think another use case that I'm seeing all the time is, number one, using Gen AI in order to either take your transcripts from ad boards and Congress summaries and generate insights from it, or either prepare materials that would help you in those conferences. Another use case, which is going to be of a lot of value, is down here at the very bottom, which is patient engagement. Imagine educating our patients so they are able to have a bigger role in shared decision-making with their provider. That would allow them to, we have seen documented when patients understand their health concerns better, they understand why they are getting certain treatments better, we know that adherence is always better. Imagine being able to generate medical insights that allows us to move the needle with getting better reimbursements as we engage with payers, providers, and patients. I think these are all great use cases for Gen AI. I think as we work on implementing these use cases, some things to consider is that building agents that are multifaceted, that use the right data sets, and they use vendor-agnostic data infrastructure and are integrated across medical databases, CRMs, and other types of literature. I think if you can't measure something, it just didn't happen. We all know that. So as we go through these different use cases, it is important to consider what our success metric would look like. Thank you for the reminder. So as I draw to the close of this presentation, I want to focus on the next couple of slides. I want to focus on metrics. I think for the most part, we all tend to focus here, financial and operational metrics. And that makes sense, right? Time savings, cost savings, quality of the work produced, improved conversion rates, cost per asset, et cetera. But I think we also need to shift our focus on the other buckets here. I'll start off with patient impact because this is something that's of great value to me. Like I said before, being able to drive improved adherence. Has my AI tool led to improved adherence within patients? Improved diagnostic accuracy, better health literacy, better health HCP engagement scores. And also, if you were to consider, did my product, which is AI-enabled, reach the market sooner or have a wider reach as opposed to another product that was not supported by AI? That's a huge metric for us to consider. Increased number of use cases being implemented right from pilot all the way to enterprise-scale projects. Improved conversion rates across use cases and projects, and increased adoption. I think this is, we have heard about change management so much over the course of the last 2 days, so I think being able to see that as a metric is important as well. And finally, strategic value creation, improved being able to forecast our resources better, improved portfolio optimization, and improved stakeholder engagement. These are other metrics to consider as we are building out these pipelines of projects with AI. Now, I do want to end on a positive note. I think we are already, this is again results from another McKinsey survey where they demonstrated that at least 22% of healthcare organizations that adopted AI have already moved from pilot to large-scale implementation projects, and at least 22% of them report that Gen AI has been their competitive differentiator. Finally, a few key challenges to bear in mind. I think there's been documented evidence. It's either data or not having a clear Gen AI strategy. These have been the two clear holdbacks for us within the healthcare space when it comes to Gen AI implementation across your enterprise. There are other things to consider, of course. Change management is a big one. Being able to not upskilling your talent is another one. And then always risk mitigation, being able to identify the risks early and developing mitigation procedures for it is very imperative. Finally, I'll end this with a call to action. Number one, start small and design for scale. I think scale is the biggest differentiator between AI just being a hype as opposed to AI having that sustained impact. So if your products or your projects are not built to scale, they are not really giving you any value. And like I said before, if you can't measure it, it didn't happen. So having clear ROIs, KPIs, OKRs, et cetera, and building your projects so they can easily be where there's interoperability across brands, assets, markets, et cetera, is critical. The second thing is having the right infrastructure. When I say infrastructure, I'm talking about having the right governance bodies, building steering committees that have contributors from legal, IT, compliance, data science, healthcare SMEs, et cetera, defining guardrails around responsible AI, transparency, explainability, all of that is going to be critical. And finally, I think we talk about silos. I think we also need, along those same lines, we also need dialogue that goes across companies. So therefore, building some sort of a consortia where you're able to discuss best practices, et cetera, is going to be critical as well. And it's also going to be important that your teams are you bring everybody along so they are able to go through this AI journey together. With that, I thank you all for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Well, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so you talk about the three different types of data. Is there one that you prefer to develop internally versus externally, or is it all of it? Like, I wonder, like, okay, no, we want a core data set that comes from internally, and then we enhance it with derived data from external sources, or?
So I think I have seen, in my experience, I have seen a lot of core data type products that are being built. They are built internally. But I know it's always, there are organizations that do like to outsource those building of those data pipelines as well. But in my experience, I have found that it's easier always to get those built internally. But then as you move forward, especially with your analytical data sets that require a lot of subject matter expert contributions and refining them and then codifying them, I think that's where we need to find an expert, external vendor or an external partner that allows us to do it. Could you? Yes, I get that, but could you expand on that a little bit? What do you mean by in the OR?
Well, like I know from being in ORs that a lot of times the documentation is, oh, well, yeah, the patient rolled in here at 8:34. Everybody, yeah, that was it. But it wasn't the exact time that that happened, and that goes on again and again and again. So the data is not really that accurate, and it has lots of limitations on SSIs.
That's a great point that you bring up. I think clinical data and your longitudinal data, especially those that come from either physician notes or EHR, EMR, cleaning up of that data and also accuracy of the data, that's one of the biggest challenges that we are tackling. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen to be my specialty. I am not a, I know if I had a colleague from IQVIA or some other Optum or other places which are working on the data more directly, I think they would be in a better position to answer that. But at the very outset, I can say, yes, data accuracy is a challenge, especially when you're working with so many moving pieces. But that's something we are working to tackle.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was some company or organization that you knew was already aggregating and cleaning OR data.
I think that's happening all the time with our data vendors. Now, I can say the data that we have been using, now again, I do not use that type of data on my everyday projects, but based on my long-term experience, I can certainly say that that type of data, we do the best that we can a lot of times, just like that experiment with Takeda did, where they had a quality of about 69 to 78%. I was going to say that, 70% mark for whatever reason happens to be an industry, I don't want to call it an industry average, but that seems to be the average that you see over and over again when it comes to model predictability, when it comes to data, not accuracy as well as clarity levels, et cetera. Of course. Any other questions? If not, thanks for your time. I think it's time for the next panel.